They were fishermen. Then Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men." Then immediately they left their nets and followed him. When he had gone a little farther from there, he saw James the son of Zebedee and John his brother, who also were in the boat mending their nets. And immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired servants and went after him. The first thing to note here is that at least for Simon, who's Peter, and Andrew, this was not the first time that they met Jesus. And I don't think it was the first time that James and John had met him either. So he wasn't just strolling along the Sea of Galilee here and said, "Hey, you, who I've never met before, come and follow me." But they had a previous experience with him. And I put there for you, John chapter 1 is where we learn about that Andrew was a disciple of John the Baptist. And he was going along with John the Baptist, and that's when he first encountered Jesus and then spent some time with him. And after spending a little bit of time with him, he went and found his brother Simon and brought him to Jesus. And every time that we see Andrew, that's what he's doing. He's bringing people to Jesus. So even though we don't really read that much about him, he's pretty important, especially with what Peter has gone on to do. And so we know that this was not the first time that they met, and they had been together with Jesus before. Since then, we saw earlier, or a couple weeks ago, that Jesus was tempted of Satan 40 days in the wilderness, and then now John the Baptist has been put in prison. So there's been some separation here before he comes and sees them again here on the Sea of Galilee while they're fishing. Now the next thing that I want to look at is just the fact that they were fishermen. Now fishermen, I would say, have some unique skills. To be a fisherman, and I'm not a fisherman, number one, I'd say you have to have a lot of patience. And I don't have patience with fishing. I have patience with working on difficult problems when it comes to web development that I do, but I don't have patience in just sitting by the side of a lake and waiting for the fish to bite. So you definitely have to have patience in being a fisherman waiting for to get the fish. But also, I would say that in particular, these fishermen had a unique skill of teamwork. It wasn't just each guy out in the boat casting a rod and doing their own thing and having a competition at it, but they had a net that they're working together. I would imagine it would take some teamwork to make that happen. So they had teamwork. It's definitely hard work, long hours, I'm sure. So they had some unique skills, but I wouldn't say that they were the most qualified. If I thought, I'm going to get a band of followers and we're going to take on the religious leaders of the day, I'm probably not going to pick these guys. I'm not going to pick some fishermen. I would think I would try to find somebody who was maybe more qualified, more educated in the law than what these guys were. So, but the thing that they had is that they were willing servants. They did what they lacked in qualification and that's really what we see in the book of Mark. The book of Mark, the symbol being the ox, Jesus as the servant, and here I think, who does he want? Servants, right? To serve and serve the Lord and be obedient. Also, when you think about picking a team or picking a group, I think it makes me think back to being in PE in school. And you might not believe this, but I was not the guy that got picked first when it came to really skilled athletes. I may not have been the shortest guy, when it came to basketball, but I wasn't the skilled guy. I was probably the least skilled person that could have played basketball when I was a kid. I'm, way better now. But, so if you're picking a team, you're not going to pick me to play basketball. You're probably not going to pick me to play anything else either. And that happened a lot. I was not the first pick guy. Maybe not the last. That was always my goal. Just don't be the last, If I could be the second to last, that would be okay. Just don't be the last. But, so if it were me and I'm picking a team, I'm probably not going to pick these guys. But Jesus knows better than I do. And I would say maybe not when it comes to high school, but definitely on the professional level of, you think of sports and picking a team, sometimes the most gifted athlete, the most skilled player, isn't the guy that gets it done, because it takes teamwork. It takes not being selfish, not being a ball hog maybe. So, and that's what these guys had. Teamwork, patience, hard work. And I look at the next part there when Jesus says, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men." They're not fishers of men already. But when you follow Jesus, he provides the training. He provides the qualifications. And that's what he did with these guys. And the next thing that I want to note there is just the response. The response was immediate. They didn't wait to, I'm going to go, do this thing first, but they immediately left their nets and took off. And I kind of wonder about Zebedee there, the father of James and John, what he might have thought when they took off. I think about that because I have two sons who do work for me, and if they just took off, I would be a little bit saying, hey, what's going on? I kind of need you here. But we do see in this account, Zebedee has hired servants, so it's not like that, he didn't have anybody else. But I do wonder about that, what he was thinking. So in thinking about that, in the call of these fishermen, I think about, what's our call? What am I called to do? And I would say, if you know Jesus, even if you don't know Jesus, there is a call. The call first is going to be to know Jesus. And then after that, it's going to be to come obediently and follow him. I don't know if that is going to mean for you to become a pastor. Maybe it's to be an usher. It could be to work in the children's ministry. I don't know the specifics, but we all have a call to walk further after Jesus in obedience. So think about that. What's your call? Now here in this picture, this is the synagogue, what's left of it, in Capernaum. And that's where we're going to be in this section. So let's look in verse 21. Then they went into Capernaum, and immediately on the Sabbath he entered the synagogue and taught. And they were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority and not as the scribes. So he taught with authority. Whenever teachers would get up in the synagogue, they might look at the reading of the scriptures and they might say, well, this rabbi says this rabbi says this other thing, and there's no authority to it. And I think even today, if I were to go to a church and someone says, well, Jesus, he may be the Son of God, he may be equal with God, but maybe he's not. Maybe because this guy says this thing over here, you'd leave and think, man, that really benefited me. I'm just as lost as I was before. I'm confused. What was the point of that? And I think that's probably how people felt going to the synagogue a lot of the times. So here, it's amazing when Jesus comes in and he's speaking with authority. And who better to do that than to speak about the scriptures than the one who's the ultimate author of the scriptures. But then what happens next? And if we were reading this on Facebook, you might see a link that says something like, Jesus gets up to teach, you'll never believe what happens next, right? You can never believe what's going to happen next. And I've already put it up there, so I didn't really give too much suspense there. But let's look in verse 23. Now there was a man in their synagogue with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, saying, "Let us alone. What have we to do with you, Jesus of Nazareth? Did you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." Now, I just want to focus on that first part for a bit. A man in their synagogue is the one that gets up with an unclean spirit. They weren't out strolling on the street and you see this guy who everybody knows this guy's kind of crazy and he probably is demon possessed. This guy's sitting in, next to you in the synagogue. I think, to me, I think, man, that would just be astonishing, right? I'm shocked that this guy, gets up and, we find out that he's demon possessed. I'm sure some were thinking, I knew it the whole time. I knew that there was something not right with that guy. So maybe it wasn't so surprising to some. I think it would be. But, and, Pastor was teaching about that on Sunday. Those that cause divisions. I'm sure this guy was probably causing some divisions in the synagogue. But he had an unclean spirit. And when we do think of today, how does this apply to us today? Do we have a Holy Spirit or do we have an unclean spirit? I hope no one here has an unclean spirit. I'm not saying that that's the case, but I think we do still, again, referencing back to what Pastor's teaching in Corinthians, in churches we can have some that don't have a right spirit. So we do need to evaluate ourselves and see, are we filled with the Holy Spirit? Are we what we should be? The other thing to note there is the confession of this demon. I think it's always amazing anytime when we read about what the demon spirits had to say about Jesus. And it's like they can't control themselves. They know who he is, and I just got to say it. I can't help myself. And it's just amazing. And I'm sure that there's some that as they're seeing Jesus here and they're saying, this guy teaches with authority, who is this guy? And then later, the guy who has a demon spirit is the one that says, this is the Holy One. I know exactly who this guy is. And so it is a testimony for Jesus and who he is. But, as we know, belief in who, that God exists, that's not enough. And it's not enough for this demon, even though he knows who he is. But is Jesus Lord of our life? So let's continue on in verse 25. But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be quiet and come out of him." And when the unclean spirit had convulsed him and cried out with a loud voice, he came out of him. So we see Jesus has power over demons. The demon already confessed it. He said, "Are you come here to destroy us?" And Jesus casts him out of the guy. He tells him to be quiet, and he gets out. So Jesus has power over demons. How much more does he have power over other circumstances in our lives? Those demons that maybe we're struggling with. Jesus has the power. Verse 27. Then they were all amazed, so that they questioned among themselves, saying, "What is this? What new doctrine is this? For with authority he commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." And immediately his fame spread throughout all the region around Galilee. The word gets out. That might be a hashtag on Twitter if it took place today. Jesus' fame is spread all around the region. And I think, again, just going to the synagogue and you're going every time and nothing's really happening and you're thinking, what's the point of this? And then this happens. It's a pretty amazing thing. Especially, you don't have TV. You don't have movies. There's no special effects. You don't have the internet. It's just, you're going through your mundane life, and then Jesus shows up, and it's amazing. So the word gets out. Now, this picture here in the background is actually what remains of Peter's house in Capernaum. Not much is left. So, verse 29, now as soon as they had come out of the synagogue, they entered into the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. But Simon's wife's mother lay sick with a fever, and they told him about her at once. So he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up, and immediately the fever left her, and she served them. At evening, when the sun had set, they brought to him all who were sick and those who were demon-possessed. And the whole city was gathered together at the door. Then he healed many who were sick with various diseases and cast out many demons, and he did not allow the demons to speak because they knew him. So here, Jesus has compassion, and we see that he has power over disease. And when he heals Peter's mother-in-law, we see he's not just doing it in the crowd. He's doing it privately in the house, away from the crowds, when nobody else is looking. Jesus is concerned and has compassion no matter what the audience is. He takes care of it. But he serves the people with compassion. And, not just Peter's mother-in-law, but the whole city who came together at the door at the evening time. Just a quick note, the reason they came at evening time was because that was the end of the Sabbath. And so that's when they came by. But this, it reminds me of a story of great compassion in my life. And a long time ago, Chris and I had been married about 2.5 years at this point. 2 weeks ago, we celebrated our 20th anniversary, so this is a long time ago. And she was pretty sick. She was in a lot of pain, didn't know what was wrong with her. We go to the emergency room. They said that it was one thing. She got some medicine for it, and, of course, you're there a long time. I think it helped a little bit, but not completely. We thought maybe that was it. You just want answers. When you're in pain, you just want, you're sick. You just want to know, what is it, so I can fight against it. And we just really didn't know that was what it was or not. And kind of, didn't really think so. But a few days later, she's in pain again. I was working up towards St. Louis. We were living in Farmington at that time. And I remember coming home or rushing back to Farmington. I go to the store. I'm looking for medicine, something to help her, because she had called, and she's in all this pain. And we're just trying to think, what could it possibly be? And so I get the medicine. I rush home. I think I may have gotten pulled over by the police. I don't think I got a ticket, but my memory's a little hazy, but I think I got pulled over. Get home. She takes the medicine, and, I don't remember all the details, but it didn't work. Whatever it was, it didn't work. So the next morning, she's in just a whole lot of pain. And she's in so much pain, she's on the floor just, she thinks she's going to die. And so, doing what I thought I should do, I stepped over her to get to the door, and I said, I got to go to work. And I left. Yeah. Don't be like me. And see, and the story of compassion there is that we're still married. Kristen has had compassion on me. But then that day, it didn't really work out well for me, as you can imagine. That day, her mom took her to the emergency room. They found out what it really was. She ended up having to have surgery. So I think I had to come home early from work anyway. So, but yeah, I just thought, I've done all I can do. I don't know. I got to go to work. So, yeah, don't be like me. I think I've improved since then. Jesus has been working on me since then to have more compassion. And, but do we have compassion when people share what's going on in their lives? And I'm far from perfect, as you know now. But I do think about this. Do we have compassion like Jesus did, that all the people come into him? Of course, we can't heal like Jesus did, but we can pray for them. Do we have the compassion to pray for them? Do we have compassion to meet their needs, meet the physical needs and whatever might help them through that situation? We really should have compassion. The other thing that's interesting here is Peter's mother-in-law, her response. Whenever Jesus heals her, immediately the fever left her and she served them. Now, if you were the one healed, you probably wouldn't be thinking, I don't think I would be thinking, let me get up and serve you now. Let me get up and do something. I think, I probably should rest a little bit. But of course it's miraculous, Jesus healing her, but she immediately serves. And so I think about, what's the greatest disease ever? What's the worst possible disease? And we all have it. It's sin. Jesus heals us of that disease. Our response should be immediately to serve him. This next slide, that's Peter's house now. He went to Lowe's and improved it a bit. Yeah. It's fairly recent, I think, but that's what's on top. And it's now a church. As you know, if you watch the video Sunday night, that's what they do with everything. Just build a church on top of it, and so you can't really see it anymore. But I did think about that. If you didn't see the Jerusalem movie that we showed Sunday night, I'd encourage you to get that and see it. One of the things that struck out to me, it's showing the perspective of three different young women. One is a Muslim, one is Jewish, and the other is a Christian. And what really stuck out to me is just all of the ceremony that goes on. And that's really who we as humans, we tend to do things. We think it's got to be more complicated. Things have to be a really big deal. I need, special clothing and special house and all these different things that must be special. But really, the thing that I see here in these three different accounts is simplicity, the simplicity and the power of Jesus. When he calls, he just says, follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men. It's not something grand. He just says, follow me. When he casts out the unclean spirit, he didn't do a dance. You didn't have to go get some weird ingredients that you've never heard of and have some smoke. And it wasn't a big deal. He just says, be quiet and come out. It's simple. And when he healed Jesus' mother-in-law, he didn't even say a word. He just took her by the hand and helped her up, and the fever was gone. It's really simple, and our best response is simple: faith and obedience. So let's serve him. Father, I just thank you for your word. I thank you that It is so simple that salvation is simple. You have provided us a way. We can't do it ourselves. We can come and we can worship you in a green metal building, something simple. We come to you just with simple faith, and our reasonable response is that we are obedient to you and to serve you. And so I just pray for each one of us. Help us to follow your call. Help us to have compassion on our brethren. Just help us to follow you. In Jesus' name, amen.